Hi, my name is Natalia and I love horror. And you might love horror, and that's why we're sitting here together face to face. Because we love horror. One of my favorite ways to indulge in horror is webcomics, webtoons, sometimes movies. Movies don't really get me that much. Horror is one of the most subjective films in any type of storytelling, whether it's novels, books, movies. It's right next to comedy, where something might be funny to me, but it might not be funny to you. Same with horror. I could think that The Exorcist is the scariest movie on the planet, and then the next person might say that it's the most outdated, overrated movie out there. We all have our definitions of horror, and personally my favorite is webtoons and manga. I've been watching a lot of Iceberg tier lists on YouTube, and I'm obsessed with the trend. I've watched over 10 Iceberg tier lists, and I love the trend. Nobody made a manga Iceberg tier list.
I don't know what I was saying here. When you Google manga iceberg list, there's like 10 that come up, so just ignore the statement. I don't know what I was saying.
But then my brain sunk a little bit deeper, and I thought, what if there was a horror manga Iceberg tier list? So I made one of my own. If you don't agree with this Iceberg tier list, make one of your own, because it took me a very long time. So yeah, let me explain the difference between manga, manhwa, and webtoon. Manga is Japanese for comics, as we all might know. Manhwa is the Korean version of that, except the layout is a little bit different. Instead of how manga is, which is black and white and very compact, it's very comic-y. Manhwas are more spaced out, panel by panel, and it's in full color. Webtoon slash webcomic basically means the same thing. It just means a comic that was uploaded to the internet or a website. So now we know. Okay, let's start off. I made a iceberg list. Here it is. It took us such a long time. Tier 1, we're going in very easy. We're going in very easy. You might have heard of some of these stories, and if you have, I'm sorry. So I'm staring down at my laptop so I could see the iceberg list and kind of visualize it so I could explain it better. So that's what I'm looking at. Tier 1 is enjoyable. It's enjoyable horror. It's not terrifying to the point where like you're traumatized to death and you can't sleep at night. It's still scary, but it's horror but enjoyable. That's what I'm gonna call it. Fun to read but still messed up. Okay, good. First one is Mariko-chan. This was released in 2018 and it has 37 chapters. I'm only gonna speak on the manga because I didn't know that there was an anime when I read it. So I'm only gonna speak on the manga, not the anime, because I heard the anime is a little bit more like comedy based as opposed to horror based, so just the manga today. This story centers around a girl named Miko who can see demons and spirits and really scary shit. Nobody else can see it except her. And on a day-to-day basis, she tries to ignore them. So she pretends that they are not there so that the ghosts and demons and shit don't follow her and torment her even more. If they do realize that she can see them, they will know. They will basically follow her everywhere. That's basically the plot. Yep, that's it. And it's not that scary plot-wise. It's just a high school student who sees demonic entities. She has a best friend, and this is the part of the story where I wanted to give it like 9 stars, but it went down to a 7 because there was some fetish and I did not like that. So I bumped it down to like a 7. Next one on the list is Warehouse. This was released in 2016 and it has 72 chapters. Warehouse is about a 28-year-old named Kim Daeun who gets kidnapped during the day by a man named Sunho. This follows the killing stalking concept where like there's some Stockholm syndrome. It kind of romanticizes the two main characters. I get how Kim Daeun like is manipulated. This one is one of those where it's not like visually terrifying. It's still scary because the plot is scary. It's like a guy who gets kidnapped, you know, but it's not visually scary. No, nothing you see is scary. So that's why it goes high up on the iceberg list. Not that scary, but it's a good plot. So the kidnapper in this story basically kidnaps Kim Daeun in order to trigger some old high school memories that they had together. I honestly don't even remember why he does this. Like, I genuinely can't fathom why. But the story is basically hostage and kidnapper situation where Kim Daeun tries to escape, but obviously doesn't work because he doesn't know where the heck he is. This is a story where it's like very toxic, unhealthy between the two characters, but there is very good storytelling in this, and it's very intriguing to watch the character try to escape over and over again and him fail. And not only that, we see Sunho have this like vulnerability to him where we wouldn't really see that in a hostage versus kidnapper situation. We would just see the kidnapper always being hostile, but we don't see that with him, not all the time. Next one is Ghost Eyes. I read this on my channel. I reacted to this on my channel over a year ago, and that is my most viewed YouTube video. So thanks for that. This was released in 2018 and has 563 episodes at the time of my recording. So it might have more by now as you're watching this. It has a whole shit ton of chapters. And let me tell you, it's a hefty plot. Tobias, or as I used to call him, Tobias, let's not talk about it. Yes, I used to refer to him as Tobias. Tobias is a 15-year-old boy who's kept secluded his entire life away from society with his many siblings. He was kept homeschooled until he somehow convinced his very religious father to allow him to attend regular public school. Tobias suffers from severe paranoia and self-destruction. Literally what? Throughout the story, he meets other people with issues and gains a friend or two. This is one of the two webcomics that is Western, so the storytelling is a bit different. I enjoyed the story because it's not, again, it's not like super terrifying. That's why it goes high on the Iceberg list. It's not. One of my favorite characters is Rudolph. He's very eccentric, outgoing, he's very nice, shy. I just want to hug him. He becomes Tobias's friend. Again, this story isn't like so terrifying. It still has horror aspects in it. It doesn't knock you off your socks. It doesn't keep you up at night. Still scary, but not like, holy shit, that's scary. Does that make sense? Next, The Vault of Horror, a collection of nightmares. This was released in 2014 and has 23 chapters. This is the first one on the list that is not one story. This is a collection of stories. It's an anthology, and it's by various different authors put into one story. Each chapter follows a different character, a different plot, it's like a one-shot, if you guys remember what one-shots are. One-shot is basically a one-chapter story where you have the beginning, the middle, and the end all compacted into one chapter. And it's basically that. It's a collection of stories. There's not much to it. It's entertaining. You get so much in one chapter because it's so compact. Next one, controversial, Angels of Death. You might have heard of the anime, and the anime, it's alright. The video game was released in 2015. The manga was released from 2017 to 2020. The anime was released in 2018. There's lots of variations of this story, but we're going to be talking about the manga. Duh. This has 12 volumes and 58 chapters. The story is about a 13-year-old girl by the name of Rachel who wakes up to find herself trapped in the basement of an abandoned building without any of her memories. Almost exactly like Warehouse. Which is kind of scary. Man, they'd be using this plot over and over again, huh? So she starts wandering the building and she comes across a psychotic man by the name of Zach Foster, who is covered in bandages and holding a scythe. Okay, cool. Who is covered in bandages and holding a scythe. So he chases her down and attempts to kill her. He tries to kill her multiple times, but it doesn't work. Rachel suddenly has a revelation in the middle of all of this, or I guess it's in the beginning. She has a revelation and suddenly she wants to die. She begins to act a little bit unorthodox. First she was scared to die and now she's asking to die. So her personality shifts very aggressively. She's no longer the Rachel from before. Now she's Rachel who wants to die. Zach and Rachel form this weird relationship where Zach promises to protect her until they come out of this weird basement thing, and Rachel wants Zach to kill her once they come out. If Rachel gets to help Zach come out because she's really smart. I liked the anime, but it didn't hit, like it was more, it made me laugh more as opposed to like be scared. So until they could come out of this basement where they are, they have to pretty much help each other out in exchange for Rachel to die in Zach's hands. Explain that. The manga was really good. I read the manga after I watched the anime. I'm gonna keep saying this, but it's not super scary. It's not like, oh my fucking god, that's wow, I'm scared. It's kind of like Saw. They go into these weird games and Zach protects Rachel, Rachel protects Zach. I enjoy the manga more than the anime, I have to be honest. I liked Zach's personality a lot in the anime because it showed who he truly was. He was kind of this like goofy serial killer. Like I couldn't really take him seriously, but he was still scary. Next one is Rotten, which was released in 2020 and has 49 chapters. A young man named Jason lives in a haunted apartment complex. He sees and has the ability to communicate with ghosts. And another important character in this story is Han, who's a police officer at a local police station who tries to help with this weird case. Han is an interesting character because he's a police officer, but he has a power to smell people's vibes. He has the ability to sniff out liars. Like if there's a serial killer in front of him, he will know. If someone killed a dog and went to the police station, he would know it's them. Does that make sense? I like this character because he's one of the most, he's not just a cop. So this apartment complex is riddled with malicious shit. It has a bunch of murder. There are souls basically trapped in the apartment of previous people who used to live there who died. And they aren't bad. They actually try to point you in the right direction to solve whatever case it is. This story isn't as terrifying as it sounds. Although it has scary visuals, I think it's more of like a shock factor type of thing. The evil paranormal stuff barely attack, or I don't think they attack at all. It's primarily the humans that are the culprits. I really like this story because all of these characters have deep, in-depth backstories and they're really fleshed out. All of the characters have different reasons why they do things. One of my favorite characters, actually, her name is Hyun Kim. She is athletically gifted. She's physically very strong. She used to have a twin sister. So her and her sister, they lived with their parents, her mom and their dad. And their father was really mean. And he was an alcoholic and he was just not a good guy. One day when their mom and their dad got into a huge argument, both Hyun Kim and her twin sister run out to play with their dog, their precious dog. They love this dog so much. And so they're playing with the dog and night falls. Their mom never calls them back. And they go in and their dad is there in the dark. No lights are on. He's drinking. And the twin sisters ask, where the hell is our mom? And the father says, she ran away. She just went. She left. But the twin sisters aren't dumb. They were outside the whole time. If they saw the mother leave, they would see the mother leave, but they didn't. The mom never left the house. They don't believe it. They're suspicious, so they start crying because, you know, their mom's gone. I would cry too. And the father gets really upset with them. Doesn't get why they're sad. The girls feel very uneasy with him because he's just a bad father. Eventually, the dad also kills the dog. The poor dog. The twin sisters are forced to live with him because they have nowhere else to go. And the mom's gone. And it's just this alcoholic, abusive father. I like this story because it tells you a really realistic aspect of real life and what happens in real life. It tells you that the real enemy isn't the ghosts, it's people. It's human beings. Last one on tier 1 is Gorgon. This was released in 2019 and has 81 chapters. Soo-hyun is an orphan who is cursed with the ability to kill people by looking them directly in the eye. One day when he meets a blind girl, he thinks of an idea to fake being handicapped. Basically, he has to hide the fact that he's blind in order to protect civilians. This is a very interesting plot, but it wasn't as horror as I thought it would be. It's more of a psychological thriller. So he starts holding a cane and wearing sunglasses and just pretending like he's a disabled person in order to protect people from his curse. He carries this curse around him and it's very dangerous, but soon after he gets involved in a murder case. Guess what? The detective who's working on this case is suspicious of him. He begins to think that Soo-hyun is deceitful and lying about his disability. This story has a lot of moments where you're like, damn, that could have been avoided. That didn't have to happen. Why did he do that? Yeah, there's some moments where you're like, God, the story is good if you're into more of a psychological thriller. Moving on to tier 2. This next one is called From the Red Fog. It was released in 2019 and has 12 chapters. From the Red Fog is set in the late 19th century England about a young boy by the name of Rwanda, whose mother is introduced as a psychopathic serial killer. The boy's mom keeps him sheltered and isolated in the basement and does her dirty work behind the scenes. He's never felt the warmth of his mother, thus leaving his heart cold and stale. At first, you feel bad for the boy, as he's portrayed as just another one of his mother's victims. Eventually, after some incidents occur, spoiler, he escapes and finds himself in a nursing home. He attempts to live a peaceful life, but we soon find out as an audience that he isn't as innocent at all and continues his mother's legacy as a serial killer. His desires torment him, and he is always drawn to murder, just like his mother. Eventually, he's taken in by a hitman organization, and they basically try to train him, and it doesn't work. His personality doesn't change, and he basically just wants to kill everyone there. It doesn't work, obviously, because it's one child against all these adult killers. Killer versus killer, except it's a child versus an adult, so obviously the child's not gonna win, but still he's constantly looking for a way to kill these people. One day, Rhonda sees Ivan and Kevin. So Ivan is babysitting Kevin for whatever reason. Rhonda sees that Kevin is being treated as he should be, which is a child. And Rhonda is very, very upset and envious because of this. To Rhonda, children are only pawns, just like he was. So when he sees another child being treated as a kid, he gets very upset. He plans to kill the kid and Ivan. This plan doesn't work. Rhonda is unable to kill Ivan and Kevin while they're sleeping because you're dealing with Ivan, who is always alert. You know, he's not like every civilian. Even at his most vulnerable times, he's still alert. Rhonda manipulates the situation. He tries to get out of it by using his age as a weapon. He starts to cry, he starts to beg to be forgiven, blah, blah, blah. But obviously, it's all just a front. This manga is really tragic because it shows that the enemy is the adult who raises the child poorly. Next one, Sweet Home. This one's my favorite. Sweet Home was released in 2017 to 2020 on Webtoons, which is an app and a website, and it has 140 chapters. This story is extremely plot heavy. Home Sweet Home, or Sweet Home. Some websites say Sweet Home, some websites say Home Sweet Home, so I don't know. Home Sweet Home is about a high school boy named Hyun-soo, whose family unfortunately dies due to a car accident while on their way to vacation. After his family's demise, Hyun-soo suffers from depression and suicidal thoughts. He moves into an apartment complex called Green Home and starts living quietly there. After a short time passes, strange things soon begin happening to him and also to the people living in the apartment as well. Hyun-soo begins to hear voices talking to him and would get spontaneous nosebleeds. And soon after, we find out that there's monsters roaming outside this apartment complex. And not only that, but the whole world. It's this post-apocalyptic world. He has to survive with a bunch of other people who are living in this apartment complex as the monsters are coming in and killing these poor people. And I really love this story because it takes you on this like roller coaster, this emotional roller coaster, and you develop this relationship with these characters. And then a lot of them just end up having unfortunate endings. And I love all of the characters, truly, and I could totally see this being like a TV show or a movie or something. Hyun-soo is a very interesting character because you don't really know what's going on with him. There's stuff that is going on in his head that you don't know, and he's experiencing these hallucinations, and by the end of it you find out, obviously, but in the beginning you don't know what's happening. And it's just interesting because he's a main character, but he's also very powerful. You see him progress. He has a like character development, and yeah, very good story. The horror aspect, it's scary, but we're not like to the bottom yet. Next one is Tokyo Ghoul. We all know the anime, released in 2011 to 2014 and also in 2018, and this has 179 chapters. I guess we all kind of know what Tokyo Ghoul is about, and if you don't, it's about a boy who goes on a date with a woman. She happens to be a ghoul, shocker, and she attempts to kill him, but this idea falls through. She ends up dying due to a construction accident. She ends up dying. He gets injured. Kaneki, who's the main character, when they both get injured, Rize, who is the woman ghoul who tries to kill Kaneki, the doctors transfer an organ from Rize, who is a ghoul, to Kaneki. When Kaneki wakes up, he is a half ghoul. He finds out that he can't eat anything. He can't really be satisfied with human food. He wants to eat humans. I liked the anime. I liked the first 2 seasons of Tokyo Ghoul, and I think the manga is a lot scarier than the anime. I think the anime sugarcoats a lot of things. Not sugarcoats, I mean it censors a lot of things. I think it's kind of unfortunate because the manga was drawn out so well, and then you just have this like anime variation where it's not similar at all. I just think that sucks. Next one, Unknown Caller. This was released in 2016 and has 3 chapters. So this is like the last one where it's like an anthology. It has different authors with different stories. One of the authors is Horong. He is my favorite artist because he makes a lot of these interactive webcomics. And what I mean by that is that these interactive webcomics are basically like you scroll down and the panels move and the characters in the panels move. It's really scary when you get into it because you're not really expecting anything to move in a webcomic. Technically, this isn't a story. It's 3 different stories, but they're all really good. Next one is Chiller. This was released on Webtoons in 2015 and has 37 episodes. This is similar to Vault of Horror. You're gonna find me talking a lot about these because they're very, very common. A lot of these horror webtoons especially will put a lot of different authors into an anthology. And I really like that idea because it showcases different types of storytelling with different art. Next one is Abara. This was released in 2005. Oldie. This has 11 chapters. This has to be the most beautiful manga I've ever read. It's so beautifully horror.
As I'm editing this, I'm realizing that this manga, in terms of art, is very similar to 𝙄𝙤𝙨𝙪𝙬𝙀, which is one of my favorite animes, but I didn't read the manga, and that's why it's not on the list. But yeah, in terms of art, very similar in my opinion.
It takes place in the future, where humans have completely obliterated the Earth and its environment. They've essentially been forced to live in cities connected only by a single highway and various tubes. It's a post-apocalyptic utopia. That being said, there are some humans that are mutations. It's very sciencey. There's a lot of scientists and experiments, and this has a lot to do with tragic future type of thing. This has a lot of shonen aspects in it, so it's not like purely horror. There's some type of action involved, and it's a really good story if you're into like good art and old type of storytelling. Obey Me. Obey Me was released in 2019 and has 39 chapters and 3 side stories. I didn't like the story. I didn't. And when it came out, a lot of people were comparing it to Killing Stalking. Jinyu is a young man who is a victim of high school bullying. His life is explained to be no different than a living hell. He's bullied, he's abused, and he is a victim to harassers, assaults. Because of his life being so miserable, he wants to end it all, pretty much. He doesn't leave his house. He only walks maximum 1 block to like the convenience store. He never ventured far from home because he was afraid that other people would see him and recognize him, and he just didn't want that. One day he's kidnapped. He's kidnapped by a guy named 𝙄𝙣. 𝙄𝙣 used to go to school with Jinyu, and they weren't close. People used to always think that 𝙄𝙣 was this weird guy. He had a stutter problem, which doesn't make him weird, but it just gave the impression that he wasn't the most dangerous person, I guess. And he kidnaps Jinyu for some unknown reason, to be honest. I don't think there was even a motive for him to kidnap him. Jinyu doesn't know why he's kidnapped. I think 𝙄𝙣 wants him to like him, but obviously it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like, how do you... What is this story? Anyway, 𝙄𝙣 kidnaps one of Jinyu's high school bullies and tortures him too, in front of Jinyu. This also has a Killing Stalking syndrome where the hostage situation and the kidnapping situation and Stockholm syndrome. Killing Stalking didn't invent all of this, but it does follow the same formula. There's also another character in this who a lot of people thought wasn't a girl, but she looks like a girl, and they fall in love. I don't get it. I don't get it. Next one is Pigpen. Released in 2020, this has 67 chapters. Pigpen is about a young man named Jinhyuk, I hope I'm saying these right, who wakes up to find himself on this island. And on this island is a mansion, and he finds himself with a family. There is a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, and an older sister. And also another guy who works on the island to help them do construction work and stuff around the house. Basically, Jinhyuk doesn't have any memories, and he spawns on this island. He doesn't know how. He doesn't know how he got there, and he starts living with this family. You don't know what they're up to, and you're just really confused, and you want to know what the hell is going on. And Jinhyuk starts to explore the island and try to find out how the hell he got here. He comes across this guy who's working construction shit on the island. He tries to ask this guy, hey dude, are you a hostage too? And this guy says, you know man, what kind of an answer is that? Anyway, the plot twist of this story is probably my favorite. It's my favorite. It's so good. This plot twist, I don't want to say it because if I say it, it'll ruin... Should I just say it? Okay, spoiler. If you want to read the story, I recommend it. You can read it on Webtoon, but I'm going to spoil it right now. Jinhyuk finds a boy who is a spirit on this island. He doesn't really exist. He's just there as an entity, and the spirit is holding his phone. So Jinhyuk really wants his phone in order to recall his memories. And finally, he gets this phone. He finds out through discovering on this phone that he was a serial killer. That's my favorite plot twist because you see him eventually evolve into the person he used to be before he got on this island, which was a serial killer. But this whole time you thought you were following this victim. You thought you were following this guy who had no idea what was going on. He was kidnapped on this island, and then you find out that he was a murderer before he was spawned on this island. One by one, Jin-hyuk kills everyone, the family, because he thinks that that is the way to get out from this island. And sure as hell, that is the way. There are some cheap jump scares in this. Over and over, you kind of get used to the jump scares, and it kind of gets old. You're not really scared anymore of them. But other than that, I love this story. Next one is Infecti. Don't know when this one was released. I couldn't find out. And it has 18 chapters. Infecti is about a high school student who suddenly turns into a man-eating monster. He soon finds out that he can revert back and forth between mutating into monster form into human form. So it's kind of like Tokyo Ghoul, except Kaneki couldn't really go back and forth between being a ghoul and being a human. So the main character in the story pretty much joins a group of people who also can mutate from monsters to humans. He tries to find out how he can basically control this power, because sometimes he can't and he ends up just killing people. It's really good and really gross, really gross. Tier 3, we're here. Next one is Bastard. This was released in 2014 and it has 94 chapters. This was by the same author as Sweet Home. Bastard is about a 17-year-old boy by the name of Jin Seon. Jin is the son of a very highly esteemed CEO named Dong-soo Seon. At first glance, this kind of seems like a regular father and son relationship. Jin comes off very reserved and quiet, and because of that, he's taken advantage of by high school bullies. He gets beaten up, he's seen as a weak, fragile boy. He's just kind of an introvert, and because of this, he's seen as a victim. Dong-soo Seon is a man who uses his son to kill people, mainly women. Bitch. Dong-soo is the real monster because he uses his son to lure in victims like tutors, friends, any type of vulnerable woman, I guess. Jin is an accomplice. He doesn't have a choice because he's very afraid of his father as well. He pretty much hates his dad, but he's also a victim of his dad. But he's also an accomplice. It's very complicated. Basically, Jin plays the role of someone who's very vulnerable, and he lures in these victims for his father to commit murder. Dong-soo is described to be very charming. He's very, very high up there, like in his job. He's a CEO and he has a reputation of being this like very charming, nice man. There's other characters in this. Jin eventually kind of befriends his bully, not really. He kind of learns how to fight a little bit and protect himself. There's also a girl in this who Jin tries to protect from being killed. It's very plot heavy and very interesting, so. Next one, oh boy, Killing Stalking. This was released in 2016 and has 67 chapters. My eye is itchy. If you have not been on the internet and don't know what Killing Stalking is, Killing Stalking follows a young man by the name of Yoonbum who is obsessed with a guy named Sung-woo. Sung-woo is described to be someone who's very popular amongst his peers. He kind of reminds me of a jock, you know, like a frat boy. That's who Sung-woo is. That's what he is. He's very popular. He has good grades, he has a job, he has his own house, he has a car. He's doing good. So on the outside, Sung-woo is this guy who everyone seems to like because of his personality. He's outgoing, but Sung-woo is actually a serial killer. And the way we find out that he's a serial killer is that Yoonbum becomes obsessed with him to the point of breaking into his house. And he breaks into his house, he finds a basement. And in this basement, he finds a victim chained up on the floor. Yoonbum is basically this stalker character who forms this obsession with a guy who is a serial killer. Like your textbook definition serial killer. It sucks because Killing Stalking ruined its own reputation by calling it a BL. There's another character in this named Sung-bae who is a cop. He is also not an innocent character. He takes it upon himself to investigate Sung-woo because he finds him suspicious. He meets him one day while him and his partner were patrolling, and he immediately finds Sung-woo to be very, very suspicious. And he's like, is this the guy whose parents died? The other one goes like, yeah, it is. But he's a good guy. And then Sung-bae's like, wait a second, isn't the case kind of sus? And the chief is like, no, he's a good guy. And then Sung-bae is like, sus. So Sung-bae takes it into his own hands to investigate Sung-woo and Yoonbum, and it's basically all just a shit show. But it's so well written. It's such a well written horror psychological thriller. It's so good. And a lot of people have romanticized this relationship, which kind of sucks because it ruins the reputation. It's not a good relationship. Originally, I put Killing Stalking on tier 1, but I figured that It doesn't belong on tier 1. Next one is Tales of the Unusual. This was released on Webtoons in 2014 and it's ongoing. It has 327 chapters. So far, there's more chapters being uploaded. This is an ongoing anthology by the same author. This author does one-shots, so they don't write one linear story. It's a bunch of stories. It's different plots. There's a formula, and that formula is there's no good ending. There's no good ending in this. Every story in this anthology has a bad ending, horrendous ending. And that's why I like it so much, but it's also kind of sad because I want some of the characters to have some justice, but there is no justice for any of the characters in the story. Prison Lab. This was released in 2016 and has 10 volumes. The story revolves around a couple characters, but primarily two important ones, Aoyama and Kirishima. Aoyama is a high school student who is a victim of Kirishima. Kirishima is the head bully. Kirishima just basically goes around assaulting classmates, and that includes Aoyama. She's basically the ringleader of all of this. Aoyama starts to hate his life, and one day when he comes home, he finds this invitation. He's invited to a game. This game is called the Captivity Game, where you choose someone who has basically ruined your life in some way or made your life terrible, and you get to do whatever you want with them. And this is like an organization. So of course Aoyama chooses Kirishima to be a hostage. Throughout the story, you kind of see a transition from Aoyama. He's this guy who you would expect to have some sympathy, some empathy, but he ends up just not being that. He turns into this just really reckless guy who tortures Kirishima. The one rule in this game, this captivity game, is that you can't kill your hostage. If you win, you basically just get a lot of money. Kirishima has to be Aoyama's hostage for 1 month, and at the end of each week, she has 3 chances to guess who is the captor. So if she gets it right, she wins. And the captor basically has to wear a mask. Aoyama takes off the mask. She can guess who it is. So yeah, Aoyama gets to do whatever he wants for 3 weeks. It's just really weird. Next one is Melvina's Therapy. This was released in 2017 and has 87 chapters. Melvina's Therapy is about a therapist named Melvina, shocker, who sits down with her ill patients and pushes out their truths and horrors from them. Melvina deals with a lot more than depression, anxiety, and loneliness. She pulls out sick people's creepy secrets and their deep, darkest thoughts. She basically traumatizes her patients, and it's disguised as helping them. So yeah, there you go. Uzumaki. This was released in 1998. This has 3 volumes and 4 episodes. Uzumaki is described to be a Japanese horror manga series from the year 1998 to 1999. It's Junji Ito's most popular work for a good reason. The story itself is kind of confusing because Junji relies on a lot of visuals and lots of eccentric art. Like, it's very in-your-face type of art. The story is as old as I am. The series tells a story about a fictional city that is plagued with a supernatural curse involving spirals. Spirals remind me of clowns. I don't like it. Tier 4. Starting from here, if you're under 18, don't read these. Brutal. Confessions of a Homicide Investigator. This was released in 2019 and has 12 chapters. This is one of the most satisfying yet very horrifying mangas I've ever read, but still so satisfying. Our main character, Hiroki Dan, he is described to be very successful and handsome, and he also happens to be a detective. Dan likes to take justice into his own hands, and although yes, he's an investigator and there is justice that comes with that, he oftentimes likes to do it himself. And what I mean by that is that he's a serial killer. Similar to how Light Yagami does it when he wants to make the world a better place by taking out all the bad people, but then you become the bad person. Sometimes the police are bad with their job. So Dan likes to do it himself. And the reason why I like this character so much is that there is justice that comes with it. I believe there's like 3 or 4 separate stories, all following really, really bad, terrible human beings with a flawed moral compass. Really bad people who are just the worst. Since Dan has the privilege of having insight, which is being a detective, he has all the equipment he needs to get ahead of everything. And sometimes he even meets these people in real life, and if he senses that they're bad people, he does the deed. It's satisfying because the people who end up dying in the hands of Dan are all, like I said, terrible people. Dan is a serial killer, but in a way he kind of sees that these people are just really on a different level. Dan is one of my favorite fictional serial killers. The one thing that really does confuse me is how he gets away with all of this. There is a way he gets rid of the evidence that he kills these people. He ends up burning his victims. He takes pictures of them. I get that he's a detective, he's an investigator, but how is it that he doesn't get caught? 𝙛𝙤𝙨𝙧𝙖𝙬 Nightmare. So this went viral on TikTok. This was released in 2020 and has 10 chapters. Around September 2021, this story actually went viral on like the mainstream TikTok, not just webtoon TikTok.
Ayan na, putangin na, toothbrush yan ha, toothbrush. Toothbrush, ayan, brush na. O sige, continue. O, naging ano, pang ahit ng bulbul. O, okay, itaas mo pa, o, itaas mo, o, yan. Putangin na yan, o. Bigla yun.
Everyone kind of knew about this. 𝙛𝙤𝙨 Nightmare isn't as plot heavy as the rest of the stories that we talked about, but the one thing that makes it really scary is that it's interactive, which means as you scroll, there are some panels that move. They jump scared me so hard. That's why this isn't on the tier 1, because if this was not interactive, I definitely would have put this on tier 1. And not only is it interactive, but you hear sounds. Okay, so there's 10 chapters, right? You finish one chapter, it's one story, and you finish it. Some of the stories require you to scroll back up, and as you scroll back up, things appear that you didn't see before. So that's what I really like about this story. Because it's interactive, it's hard to have that many stories because it is hard to make. There's a lot of CGI involved. There's the ghost in the elevator, there's a mom in the park, there's the razor blade one. That was the one that went viral on TikTok. People actually started recreating it, not actually using a razor to brush their teeth, editing it to make it look realistic. 𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙖𝙬. This was released in 2016 and has 6 volumes. I personally didn't like the story. So basically what it's about is a whole bunch of people wake up in this abandoned building that is blocked off. You can't get out. It's caged off, it's chained up, you can't get out. It's basically like Saw. And all these people are held hostage in this building without any food, but with running water. And the anime man did a video on this, so if you want a better in-depth analysis on the story, you can go watch his video. Everything you could ever imagine, cannibalism, murder, torture, everything, it's in here. Next one, Heartless. This was released in 2016. It's 1 volume and has 6 chapters. This is about an incubus, who lures and seduces hitchhikers. This incubus has wings, he's beautiful, and he lures in people to feed on them. There is a love story intertwined with this, which is like, why? But the same author made a better story, which is coming up on the Iceberg list, so stay tuned for that. There is a surprisingly good amount of reviews on this story, which I can understand because the art is so beautiful. There's a tragic love story involved in this with the incubus, and there is gore in this, like there is guts and torture and stuff like that. So yeah, 𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙖𝙬 no omocha. I tried with that. This was released in 2018 and it's ongoing, but it has 187 chapters. Now, a lot of people hate this story. It's just, again, it follows the killing stalking syndrome where the victim kind of falls in love with the perpetrator. It's about a high school boy who is a delinquent who moved to an all-boys school. His name is Tayo because his parents want him to be disciplined. But this doesn't work. This all-boys school is very prestigious. There's not really any delinquents or bullies or stuff like that. But since he is a delinquent, he is automatically a target. Then we're introduced to Sora, who takes it upon himself to discipline Tayo in a weird way. Tayo, who's basically seen as a bad person in the school, who Sora sees as someone who needs to be disciplined. What that results in is that Tayo becomes a victim of Sora. Sora ends up abusing him, assaults him, harasses him, follows him, basically imprisons Tayo. Everyone in the school sees Tayo as just a plaything for Sora. Tayo ends up having a character under development as the story goes on. After the first 15 chapters, he kind of gives up on, gaining his power back. The horror aspect comes from Sora. I find Sora to be a really realistic type of abuser. You see this in everyday life. You see people like Sora who torment you, who abuse you, who belittle you. And it's just scary, especially like if you're a vulnerable person. With Taiyo wasn't introduced as a vulnerable person. It's just like his surroundings made him vulnerable because nobody was like him. Sora is your typical just stalker, abuser, assaulter. It's just not good. Next up is Pumpkin Night. This was released in 2016, but it's left on hiatus, so it's not finished. And this has 59 chapters. This one had a fair bit of popularity on TikTok. Pumpkin Night is about a bully victim. When will we get over these bully victim plotline? Naoko Kirino is a victim of bullying. She is harassed. The harassment and assault ranges from having her hair and clothes forcefully cut all the way to them beating her. One of the individuals who plays part in this bullying is a student by the name of Kazuya. But he didn't really bully her. He just watched her like a pedestrian. Naoko somehow develops feelings for him, and so does he. What? So one day, Naoko is nominated to be the Pumpkin Queen. And her intuition was, she was very suspicious of this. Why wouldn't she be? And Naoko thought it was a trap. But Kazuya was like, no, babe, it's nothing, it's fine. Nothing's gonna happen. Kazuya soothed her suspicion, and Naoko believed him. One of her bullies, who is named Naruto, they prank her by telling her that she becomes the Pumpkin Queen. Except, Naruto takes sulfuric acid and fills polyethylene bags with it, then taping it in a pumpkin mask. As Naoko placed the pumpkin on her head like she was supposed to, the bags popped and the acid burned and melted her entire head while inside the pumpkin. It didn't kill her though, because then the story would end. After that, Naoko starts to seek revenge. She sets her eyes on the targets. She basically becomes the antagonist of the story as it goes on. Tier 5.
As you can see from the list of tier 5, I have Pumpkin Night in there, which we just talked about, so I don't know why it was in tier 4, but it should have been in tier 5. That was an editing mistake, and yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna meditate. Okay, we're good. Killing Morph. Killing Morph was released in 2019 and has 36 chapters. This is very similar to Pumpkin Night, art style wise. Killing Morph is about a serial killer who ends up killing a bunch of people in the middle of the street, except one person. And you guessed it, that one person is our main character. Her name is Madoka. Madoka is a high school student. M, which is a serial killer, well, he's called M in the story. While he's doing this weird killing spree in the middle of the street, runs past Madoka, and he doesn't kill her, which raises some eyebrows. We then find out that M has this apparently look in her eyes, as M describes it, and that is why he refuses to kill her. The story progresses into M having this weird supernatural power where he could spawn in 2 different locations. It's really strange because you don't really know who this character is, and you don't really know what's going on with Madoka. It's the serial killer that refuses to kill the main character trope. Next up is 9 Stones. 9 Stones was released in 2016 and it has 110 episodes at the time of my recording. 9 Stones is about a young boy named Alistair who is the son of a mafia head boss. And this mafia head boss wants to make Alistair his underling, and he wants to train him to be the next boss, you know? Alistair is not like that. His personality is very kind of innocent, sweet, well, kind of. A lot of shit happens in the story. I don't even want to spoil it because I feel like you would do yourself a better favor by reading it. It's such a good story. Another character in this is Chris, is a character who has problems. He basically works under Alistair's dad. He is assigned to kind of train Alistair to be more thick-skinned, but Alistair doesn't know this. He has no idea that this is happening. He just thinks that he's working with a guy at this grocery store. Convenience store, my bad. Chris is not who he says he is. He's very, very masochistic. And Alistair and Chris develop this relationship. Alistair becomes very vengeful by the end of the story because he finds out that his dad betrayed him, Chris betrayed him, and a whole bunch of other people betrayed him. His dad sets up a fake killing of Chris after Chris and Alistair form a kind of relationship. And what Alistair believes, what he believes he saw, was that his father brutally killed Chris in front of him. But this didn't happen.
Okay, I realized I'm not really making sense here, so let me explain. Basically, the dad bought in a stunt double and made Alistair believe that it was Chris's body.
The dad made him believe it happened. The dad knew everything. He didn't like the fact that Alistair and Chris were forming this weird relationship, and he basically killed off Chris. Chris was in on this, and Alistair finds all of this out. He was lied to, he was traumatized, and then suddenly he finds out his dad pranked him. Alistair goes after his father when he's an adult. He gets treatment, he gets therapists, doesn't work. He becomes very vengeful. He starts killing off everyone who betrayed him. He just becomes ruthless. It's one of my favorite stories because it's so heartbreaking. Next one, God's Left Hand, Devil's Right Hand. This one's really old. Was released in 1986. This has 6 volumes and 77 chapters. This is about a young boy who kind of foresees the future. He foresees bad things happening in front of him, and because he's a little boy, nobody really believes him. His older sister does not believe him. The art style is very, very 80s. If you're not used to like the old manga art style, you won't be used to this. It's very reminiscent of Junji Ito's works because of the art. It's so in your face and like gory, and I'm so glad there's no color in this, because if there was, that would have been a lot lower on, that would have been probably on tier 6. This is all about shock value. This little boy foresees bad things happening. He tries to warn people. Obviously nobody believes him because he's a kid. That's basically the story. Finally, we're on tier 6. Starving Anonymous. This was released in 2019 and it has 62 chapters. This focuses on a post-apocalyptic future where humans are experiments. They are just human lab rats. This gets really, really gross. This is one of the most visually disgusting looking mangas. It's good, like the art is really good, but it's like if it was in real life, I would have threw up. Starving Anonymous starts off with a high school student named Kazu and another high school student named IE. So while they're on their bus home, suddenly they faint. And once they wake up, they see that everybody on the bus is dead. Human corpses everywhere. They don't know how it happened. So the story introduces a lot of aliens and force-feeding humans until they're 300 pounds. It's basically like what you would imagine what the government would do if they wanted to experiment on humans. It's a very thought-provoking plot line. It is kind of really disturbing to read. That's why it's so low on the list. I think this would have been really, really good as a movie. It's very like a survival plot line. Next one, Gin Men. This personally made me fear elephants. I can't do animals anymore, especially elephants. Our main character, Jingu, loves animals. He used to go to the zoo as a kid all the time because it was his comfort place. He loved a certain elephant who resided in this zoo. He called her Hanayo. Hi, sorry to rudely interrupt, but it's the next day. Let's continue on, shall we? Let's just pretend that I'm filming on the same day. One day, Jingu takes a friend to the zoo to relive some old memories. The moment he arrives, he notices that something is really, really wrong. He goes into the zoo, nobody's there, the staff members aren't there, and the vibe is off. So Jingu was like, what's going on? So he investigates that the animals are suddenly corrupted, kind of like a whole different species. And it's hard to describe it until I show you pictures, because these animals have become cursed almost, and they look deformed. They don't look like their old self anymore. It's like, you know what an elephant looks like in real life? Just scrap that. It doesn't look like that anymore. They have almost human-like faces and they are very intelligent. Jingu is shocked and he wants to know how he can reverse this, because this is just weird. Why is this happening? So the animals escape, and of course they try to kill the humans. They try to kill everybody, that including Jingu and his friends and family. The whole world is in ruin. Everyone is under attack by these animals and nobody can really know why this is happening. And Jingu wants to know what the hell is going on. And not only that, Jingu loved this elephant named Hanayo. But Hanayo is also very, very corrupted. She's not like her old self. She's not really the elephant that Jingu knew from before. Now she's out to get him. So Jingu and a couple other people that he trusts are on the run from these vicious animals. But remember, Jingu is very, very emotionally attached to this elephant, and to let her go is heartbreaking. He wants to know the secret. Why is this happening? Why are the animals attacking? Eventually we find out the animals, they feel like the humans have imprisoned them in a way and see them as nothing more than just, you know, just animals in cages, and they want revenge. These cursed animals get smarter and smarter and smarter and more intelligent, and they start to keep humans hostage. They torture them, they eat them. It made me kind of paranoid. I know that type of thing won't happen in the real world, but you know, imagine if it did. Imagine if animals suddenly were as strong and as intelligent as humans. We would be nothing. against a lion, I'd be nothing. If I was put in a cage with a lion or an elephant, I would eat shit. Jingu has this weird thing about him because, you know, he's a main character, and it's almost like he has some animalistic characteristics as well, and we don't really know where this is coming from. It's all kind of like a plot twist, like, is he an animal? Is he part animal? So in the story, the bad guy isn't the serial killer, it's literally an animal. Probably something you have in your house. Luckily, I don't. I can't imagine a world where elephants are out to get me. That is fucking terrifying. Elephants now scare me, and I don't want to own one. If they were on sale, I would not buy it. The story kind of gets emotional. We see a soft side to Hanayo, the elephant, with Jingu because they kind of grew up together. Jingu is kind of like, why would you betray me like this? The main thing about this manga is that it's really fucking visually terrifying. So go at it. Next one is Madk. Next one is MADK. I don't know how to say the title. This was released in 2017 and the first volume has 178 chapters. I read this one a very long time ago, and when I read it, I was equally as confused as I am today. Makoto is our main character. He is a high school student and he is described to have very interesting sexual preferences. I genuinely don't know how to describe it. He has very eccentric interests, fetishes. Nobody can really satisfy these urges until he meets a demon. So one random day, he discovers somehow that he could summon a demon through a book by saying a ritual. Surprise, surprise. It works. This demon's name is Jay, and he's summoned, but Makoto has to sell his soul to him in order for him and the demon to make a deal. Makoto finds out that Jay can satisfy his urges, and they form a relationship together where they satisfy each other. There is some very gruesome, I don't know how to describe some of the things that I've seen in this manga. I genuinely don't. It's very gory and wild, but the one thing I have to say is that the demon is really pretty. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this story before. Anything. I've read stories where the main character has some weird fetishes, but I've never read something like this before with a demon. And I'm not kink shaming. Not that you could ever do this in real life, because I'm pretty sure you would die. Makoto is transported into this demon world where Jay resides in. And in order to go back to his real world, he has to wait a pretty long time. But Makoto is pretty satisfied with this demon. Through reading some reviews, a lot of people have criticized this because it is really gruesome. But I do enjoy the art and I do enjoy how it's drawn. Next one is Feeding Lamb. This one was released in 2013 and has 2 volumes. Alright, we're nearing the end, folks. A boy named Brandon saves another boy named Andy from getting hit by a train when they were kids. Unfortunately, upon doing so, Brandon is instead hit by the train and has to suffer consequences, that including epilepsy. Because of this and the fact that Brandon was sacrificed, Andy is indebted to take care of him for a very long time because he feels like he owes him. Fast forward in the future, Andy is a nurse and Brandon is living with debilitating epilepsy in which he has to take medication for. Andy's a nurse and has the capability of taking care of Brandon. That is exactly what happens. Andy takes care of Brandon well into adulthood, but there is a plot twist. I would not have put this on tier 6 if that was all to the story. Andy is a serial killer. Brandon has no idea. No clue. No clue. Since Brandon is unable to get bitches, Andy is also indebted to relieve him sexually. Not only is Andy a serial killer, but because he is a nurse, he has some knowledge of how the human body works. So he has the anesthetics, he has everything he needs in order to kidnap someone and take them hostage successfully and without any hesitation. I'm not sure why Andy kills. I'm not sure what his motive is, to be honest. I genuinely have no idea. The reason why I question if Brandon actually knows that Andy's a serial killer is because during one of Andy's serial killing moments, in the middle of it, Brandon calls him and asks him to bring him food. Andy doesn't really say anything. He doesn't say like, hey, I'm killing right now, I have to go. He just says, okay. He's completely oblivious to this. Throughout reading the story, I didn't know what the relationship was between Brandon and Andy. I didn't know if they were friends. I didn't know if they were more than friends. What were they? We know that Brandon saves Andy's life, but when they're adults, it's like they have nothing for each other. They don't really like each other that much. They don't really feel anything for each other. So reading this, I had no idea what their relationship even was, what it entailed, why it was happening. All we knew was that Andy was a serial killer with no clear motive, and Brandon was oblivious and living his life with epilepsy. The story implies something with it too, but we don't know what it is. We know that Andy takes care of Brandon, but it's almost like Brandon doesn't really give a shit. This story constantly goes back and forth between the past and present. It plays with the timeline a lot, which I really like. I like stories like that. It unfolds a story and unfolds the past and present at the same time. With all the stories that I've read so far and all that I've mentioned, I have to say that this manga has to be the most realistic portrayal of what humans actually look like. They have stubble, they have hair, they're not like super skinny or have 8-pack abs. They're not super toned, they're just average looking humans. They aren't 8 feet tall with chiseled jawlines and huge eyes. So that's one thing I can give this story credit for, is that it's very, very realistically drawn, and it doesn't really rely on the art that much as it relies on realism. I forgot to mention that the same author wrote Heartless, so you can expect both stories to be very, very gory. There wasn't really a character that I was rooting for. I did like Brandon's character, even though he had some moments where he was a bit insufferable. I can't really explain the gore that much, but if I were to, I would say it's the direct opposite of 9 Stones, whereas 9 Stones tried to make the gore as colorful and kind of pretty. Gore isn't pretty, but imagine if it was. This is like the complete opposite. Next one is our last one. I'm gonna rant. This is called Shin Gendai Ryokiden. This was released in 2004 and it has 10 chapters. This is possibly the most disgusting thing I've ever read in my entire life. The Anime Man made a video about this where he described the story to be really disgusting and gross and not good. So if you want a better in-depth video, go to his channel. This manga is based on a real-life murder case that happened. And it wasn't just a murder case, it was an unjust murder case. All the other mangas were scary, but they weren't about real people. In this one, it's actually based on the victim. There was a girl named Junko. Junko was a high school student. She was 17. She was kidnapped in 1988 for 44 days and was brutally tortured, and eventually she was killed. The kidnapper was a boy she rejected, and the boy was so fucking pissed off that he kidnapped her. He kidnapped her with, I believe it was 4 other people, and they kept her secluded as a hostage in an apartment complex, I believe. She was brutally tortured in the most horrific ways possible. If you want to read the full article, you can Google her name. There's pictures. This manga took this real-life murder case and exploited it. For what? I can't even read what happened to her, let alone see a drawn-out version of it. So in real life, Junko had to endure so much torture. Her limbs were set on fire, she had to eat bugs, she had to do explicit things in front of other people, she was exploited, harassed, assaulted by hundreds of men. Her insides were obliterated, her outsides were obliterated. It was a real-life hell for her. And the reason why she wasn't found earlier is because when she was kidnapped, these perpetrators made her call her family, and they forced her to tell her family that she is with a friend. She's fine, everything's fine, don't look for me. Like, she could have been saved if it wasn't for that. A lot of other things have happened to her. She was put in a freezer, she was beaten with objects, she was naked 24/7, she wasn't given any clothes. When she was forced to eat bugs and she would throw up from them, she was punished for that. It's just the worst case that I've ever read in my entire life, and to make a manga about it and to exploit it, that's basically the manga. There is no plot. The plot is about a case that happened, but it was taken and drawn out to be this like weird torture thing. And this isn't in the manga, but I have to say that the people who caused this are walking free right now. Imagine that. They're walking as free men right now. Here's a review that I read on a website while I was researching for this video. I've come across my fair share of bad books in my life, but this takes the fucking cake. The suffering of a human being should never be used for profit or for material. I don't think this manga should have ever existed. Imagine if someone did this with a Ted Bundy case or a Jeffrey Dahmer case. People would sue. The family would sue. So yeah, that is the last manga on this list. We've reached the end, kids. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.